It's 11:15 p.m. on November 22nd, 1987. WTTW, Channel 11 in Chicago, is airing a Doctor Who episode called Horror of Fang Rock. Partway through, the picture cuts out. For a few seconds, there's nothing but static and dead air. Then a figure appears on screen, wearing a rubber mask molded to the face of a character called Max Headroom, swaying in front of a spinning sheet of corrugated metal that mimics the show's signature striped background. No one at the station put it there. No one at the station can stop it. The engineers on duty are watching the same broadcast everyone at home is, and none of them know how to end it. This isn't the first time that night. 2 hours earlier, the same mask appeared during the sports segment on WGN's Evening News for close to 25 seconds before engineers there switched the frequency of the link carrying the signal from the studio to the transmitter, knocking the intrusion off the air. No intelligible audio ever came through at WGN, just a loud, buzzing distortion. WTTW's engineers, with nobody on duty at the affected tower that night, don't get the chance to do the same. The broadcast runs uninterrupted for close to 90 seconds. The figure sings, talks, references WGN by name, mentions an old cartoon called Clutch Cargo, holds up and shakes a can of Pepsi, and at one point, bends over and gets spanked with a flyswatter by someone standing just off camera. Then it's over. Doctor Who comes back on, mid-scene, as if nothing happened. Nobody has ever been arrested for this. The FCC investigated for years and closed the case without naming a suspect. Nearly 4 decades later, the footage still circulates online, viewed by people who weren't alive when it aired. And the people responsible, because there were at least 2, have never come forward. Act 1. What Chicago Saw. Max Headroom wasn't some obscure reference in 1987. He'd started as a fictional AI newscaster in a British TV movie, spun off into his own American series on ABC, and by that November, he was the face of a national Coca-Cola advertising campaign.
The study of good taste. In fact, the taste that stands the test.
Yes!
The test where new Coke takes on Pepsi.
Complete with a digitally stuttering catchphrase and a permanent, glitching grin. Audiences didn't need context to know whom this was supposed to be. That recognition matters more than it seems to. Whoever built this wasn't hijacking a broadcast signal at random and hoping people would find it unsettling on its own. They were doing it in costume, wearing a character the entire city already knew, which means the choice itself was a message before a single word got broadcast. The first hijack occurred at 9:14 p.m. during the sports segment of the 9 o'clock news on WGN TV. Sports anchor Dan Roan was mid-broadcast when the picture broke apart into static. Then the mask appeared. Same rictus grin, same spinning sheet of corrugated metal standing in for Max Headroom's animated neon grid. The only sound was a harsh, buzzing distortion. No words, nothing intelligible. Engineers at WGN determined the intrusion was riding on the microwave link carrying the signal from the studio to the transmitter atop the building housing their tower, and they knocked it out by switching that link's frequency. The whole thing lasted close to 25 seconds before Roan was back on screen, visibly rattled by whatever he'd just watched happen on the monitor in front of him.
Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I. Actually, the computer that we have running our news from time to time took off and went wild. So what we're going to do is start over from the top with the bears.
WGN reported the incident, standard procedure for unauthorized interference with a broadcast signal. What nobody at the station knew yet was that this wasn't a one-time stunt aimed at them specifically. It was a dry run, or a warm-up, or simply the first of 2 planned hits, because 2 hours later, it happens again, at a different station entirely. At WTTW, mid-episode of Doctor Who, the picture cuts a second time. Same mask, same spinning panel. Nobody kills the audio in time, and for close to 90 seconds, viewers get the full performance. Distorted, buzzing speech, a direct reference to WGN's earlier failure to stop him. Proof that whoever this was had watched their own first intrusion get shut down and decided to comment on it during the second. A call out to Clutch Cargo, an animated series from the 1950s known for its unusual lip-sync technique. Some awkward, deliberate movement in front of the camera. The Pepsi can, held up and shaken like a prop in a commercial parody. And near the end, the flyswatter, delivered by a second person who stays just outside the frame the entire time. visible only as a hand in a motion, never fully in view. Then the transmission cuts on its own, and Doctor Who resumes exactly where it left off, as if a scheduled break had simply ended. 2 stations, 2 hours apart, same mask, same backdrop, same night. Whoever did this hit 2 separate broadcasts and walked away clean from both of them. Chicago in 1987 wasn't a small or lightly monitored television market. WGN was, and still is, one of the most watched independent stations in the country, syndicated nationally on cable. WTTW is Chicago's flagship public broadcasting station, watched that night by a large and engaged audience for a Doctor Who episode with its own devoted following. These weren't obscure, low-traffic channels where an intrusion might go unnoticed for hours. Thousands of people saw at least one of the 2 broadcasts live, in real time, which is part of why the footage exists at all. Someone was recording, or a station archived it, and copies eventually made their way out into public circulation. The mask and setup themselves weren't sophisticated as props. A rubber Max Headroom mask, a piece of hand-spun corrugated metal panel to fake the animated background, and whatever thin recording setup captured the audio that eventually got broadcast. That's the strange asymmetry at the center of this whole case. The costume is homemade. The delivery system that put it on 2 television stations' signals is not. Act 2. What this actually required. Here's the part that tends to get flattened in retellings that focus only on the mask and the flyswatter. Pulling this off wasn't something you could improvise with a camcorder and some nerve. Getting a pirate feed onto a commercial television station's signal strongly enough to fully replace what viewers are seeing requires actual broadcast transmission equipment, not a prank prop. It requires a directional antenna pointed at the right target and a transmitter putting out enough power aimed precisely enough to overpower the specific signal path it's targeting. This is not consumer electronics, and it wasn't in 1987 either. Gear capable of overpowering a licensed broadcaster's own frequency wasn't something you picked up at a hobby shop or built from a kit in an afternoon. Using it this way is also a federal crime. Unauthorized transmission that interferes with a licensed broadcast signal falls squarely under FCC jurisdiction, and the agency treats it seriously precisely because it demonstrates that someone out there can override what an entire market is watching, at will, with no warning. Whoever did this either had genuine broadcast engineering knowledge, had the resources to acquire sophisticated enough equipment to fake the results of that knowledge, or both. And they didn't do it once, they did it twice, at 2 different stations, roughly 2 hours apart, on the same night. That timeline rules out spontaneity. Someone set up equipment, executed the intrusion, broke everything down or repositioned it, and then successfully hit a second, separate target before the night was over, or had a second unit and a second location ready to go from the start. Either version points to planning, not improvisation. The WTTW footage also confirms this wasn't a solo act. Whoever swings the flyswatter never stays in frame long enough to be identified, but they're there, on camera, participating. That means, at minimum, 2 people knew about this in advance, agreed to do it, executed it together, and have both kept quiet about it for going on 4 decades. 1 person keeping a secret for that long is unusual. 2 people keeping the same secret, in sync, without either of them slipping, talking, or bragging at some point across nearly 40 years, is a different order of unusual entirely. Positioning matters too, in a way most retellings skip past. To overpower a station's signal at the point where it actually reaches viewers, you generally need to be within a workable range and along a clear line of sight to the transmission path you're targeting. That's not a minor technical footnote. It means whoever did this understood Chicago's broadcast geography well enough to place themselves correctly, twice, at 2 different points in the city, in the same night, without getting caught in the act at either location. None of this demanded movie budget resources. It demanded real technical knowledge, real advanced planning, and a second person willing to show up, participate, and then never say a word about it publicly for the rest of their life. The specific mechanism engineers eventually worked out was a studio transmitter link, or STL, the microwave feed each station used to send its signal the several miles from the studio to the antenna on top of its tower. Both WGN's and WTTW's towers sat atop tall buildings in downtown Chicago at the time. To hijack an STL, you don't need to out-broadcast a station's full-strength transmission to every home antenna in the city. You need to aim a stronger microwave signal directly at that one relay link and overpower it at that single point in what engineers call a capture effect. The stronger signal simply wins, and the transmitter sends out whatever it's currently receiving, which is now the pirate feed instead of the studio's. That's a narrower technical target than outright overpowering an entire city's broadcast signal, but it still isn't a small bar. It requires knowing which frequency a specific station's STL operates on, aiming a direct signal at it with enough precision and power to achieve the capture effect, and doing so from somewhere with a clear line of sight to the tower in question. Whoever did this needed to know that detail about the internal technical setups of two separate stations, not broadcast engineering as a general subject. That specificity is worth sitting with. This wasn't a general prank aimed at television as a concept. It was aimed at two named specific Chicago stations on one particular night by someone who knew enough about how those two stations' signals actually moved from studio to tower to find a way in. Act 3. Where the investigation stopped. The FCC treated this as what it was, a federal offense, committed twice in one night against two separate Chicago television stations. That drew real investigative attention, not a shrug. A reward for information was floated publicly. Tips came in over the following months and years. None of them, as far as any public record shows, ever led to an arrest, a named suspect, or a confirmed identity. Retrospective reporting has circled back to this case repeatedly over the decades. Local Chicago coverage, national tech and culture outlets revisiting it on the 30th anniversary in 2017 and again on the 35th in 2022, and a more recent, deeply reported piece from Chicago Magazine that dug back through what records still exist. Across it all, the same pattern holds. Theories exist. Names have circulated online, floated by people convinced they've cracked it. None of those names have ever been substantiated by the FCC, by law enforcement, or by a verified confession from anyone actually involved. The case remains, on paper, exactly what it was the day it closed: unsolved. What's proven even harder to pin down than the identity question is the content of the broadcast itself. Nearly 40 years later, there's still no agreed-upon, convincing decoding of everything said and referenced during those 90 seconds on WTTW. The specific clutch cargo reference, the direct call-out to WGN's failed attempt to stop the first intrusion, the exact intent behind the flyswatter moment, staged and timed like it meant something specific to whoever planned it. These read one of two ways. Either the content was genuinely meaningful to a small circle of people who understood the references and nobody outside that circle has ever cracked the code, or it was deliberately built to sound like it meant something specifically to keep people decoding it for decades without ever handing them an answer. Both readings have been argued at length by people who've spent real time and effort on this. Neither has won. The technical bar required to execute this narrows the field of who could plausibly have done it. Real broadcast knowledge, or the money and access to fake having it convincingly. A second person willing to participate on camera and remain silent afterward indefinitely. That second requirement tends to get underweighted in how this story usually gets told. Plenty of unsolved cases involve one person carrying one secret alone. This one involves at least two people carrying the same secret together, in sync, for nearly 40 years, without either of them ever slipping. The legacy. Most broadcast signal intrusions that get attempted are amateur, low effort, and short-lived. Someone briefly interrupting a signal with a crude message before getting caught within days, if not hours. The Max Headroom intrusion is the exception people keep coming back to, specifically because it never got solved, and because the FCC's own case file, the record of a federal investigation into two intrusions on one night, closed without an answer. That unresolved status is exactly why the case outlived the decade in which it happened. It's referenced in academic writing about media security and broadcast vulnerability. It shows up in documentaries and retrospective journalism roughly every 5 years, timed to anniversaries, each time asking the same question the last piece asked. It's cited in online communities dedicated to unsolved mysteries and analog-era internet culture, treated with the same weight as digital-era mysteries that came decades later, despite predating the public internet entirely. The footage itself, grainy, low resolution, filmed off a television screen in some of its surviving copies, has become one of the most recognizable pieces of pre-internet strange media, specifically because nothing about it has ever been resolved. Every retrospective piece, every anniversary write-up, every forum thread trying to decode the clutch cargo reference one more time runs into the same wall the FCC ran into in 1987. There's no new evidence. There's no new suspect. There's just the same 90 seconds of footage, re-examined by a new audience each time, arriving at the same unanswered place the last audience arrived at. The people behind this are either still alive or they aren't. If they're alive, they've been sitting on this for closer to 40 years than not, long enough to marry, raise kids, retire, watch the internet turn their 90 seconds of static into something strangers analyze frame by frame and never once let it slip to someone who'd talk. The clip is still out there, unchanged. The same 90 seconds that ran on WTTW that night in November of 1987. Anyone can watch it right now. The FCC's file on the case is closed. Nobody has ever been charged. Nothing about who did this or why they chose that mask, that antenna, that night has never been explained.